Good afternoon and assalamu alaikum to everyone joining us today, including our panelists and our listeners online. I'm joined by my co-host Zubair in this series of In Conversations that follows up from some of the earlier conversations Zubair and I have been having on what's likely to be an incredible game-changing journey in our startup entrepreneur space.
Jazakallah, Firoz. Well, yes, as you said, we're hosting a thought leadership series that engages entrepreneurs, investors, and policymakers on the same platform in a peer-to-peer setting, and it's to discuss thought-provoking themes for the new wave of entrepreneurs that are shaping the global halal economy.
So this series has been dubbed Reflections, and it's the world's first online-offline entrepreneurship hub, where our panelists will be sharing their insights and expertise.
And Firoz will also be answering all of those questions that every startup co-founder is itching to ask on the real value of these relationships and the thematic discussions often missed on the startup circuit. So we'll be talking about impact, we're talking about the SDGs, and of course, access to funding, women economic empowerment, inclusion, wider diversity, and of course, sustainability.
And then all of these conversations are going to culminate in a plenary of intellect, expertise and talent in December in London at the Excel Centre for the Halal Economy Conference and the Halal Expo.
Indeed, absolutely.
Okay, so let's get started then. We already have a list of those questions, but our listeners can use the Q&A tabs to ask questions, which will come through to myself and Zubair, and we'll put them to our panel. Can I please ask you to keep your questions to the point and to which panelist the question is addressed to?
Okay, so today we have champions who've navigated the journey themselves. So all their bios are in the LinkedIn hyperlinks that we've already shared. And we'll be asking them, what do they believe investors look out for entrepreneurs and startups in amongst their expertise areas of finance and Islamic finance. And what we'll be discussing also is if there's a set formula or a pattern that people such as our panelists, whether investors or as business, follow or look out for, or is this really all about some kind of gut feeling, or do we work on ideas, persons and trends?
So welcome to all of our panelists. We have today Mohammed Raza, Senior Executive Vice President of Mizan Bank, Azhar Aslam, Head Islamic Banking at Standard Chartered Bank Pakistan, who'll be joining us in a bit. We have Ibrahim Khan, CEO of Islamic Finance Guru from the UK, and we have Roger Dawood Bayat, entrepreneur, private equity, venture capital from Pakistan. We both want to personally welcome you to our In Conversation series, and of course for being part of the bigger picture as we reshape the halal economy narrative.
Okay, so no formal introductions. Like I said, we're going to keep it casual. So sit back, relax. We'd like you to wear your investor hat and, well, startup entrepreneur hat as well. And do cast your mind back to when you started. So I've got the first question for us. I'm going to kick off. And this is to anyone. And it's quite a popular one. So nothing too technical here. Ethical companies have blossomed across the world in recent years, from fair trade and clothing to issue-driven social projects. Do you think that it's no coincidence that halal businesses have bloomed simultaneously? This is to anyone, open question.
Okay, I would like to answer this question.
Sure.
Before going into the depth of this question, let me clarify one very important thing and one very important factor. That whenever we talk about Islamic finance or halal finance or halal business, this ethical term comes in line with it, like it's a synonym. But there is a difference between what is halal and what is ethical. Just to give you an example, by elaborating that a business may be ethical, but it may not be halal. But any business which is halal is ethical. So these two terms are used quite commonly. So yes, the halal business has grown over the last few years due to its realization, due to awareness. But due to this fact, the companies which are not doing halal business, they are also entered into this ethical business. So yes, this has grown, and this has grown very fast.
Great.
Roger, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So I think ethical finance, as we all know, takes into account not only just the financial returns, but also the impact it has on its surroundings. So whether it's environmental or social or governance, these are some of the factors that we have to sort of look at with this. Now, I would say that a lot of like my esteemed colleague had said earlier, that there are entities that are out there in the world that obviously have taken upon it themselves to be able to be part of an ethical. So they're taking a responsibility, which I think is in line with the halal community that is there. So I feel that yes, they go hand in hand, and I feel that this is also something that it can also be applied to non-Islamic entities which have seriously mushroomed back.
Okay, great question. Well, can I pick up? I've got a question coming in here.
Sure.
I suppose to all of you guys. How are your companies and your products or services solutions tackling the halal finance's more expensive issue? Comes up time and time again. Halal finance is certainly more expensive than mainstream. Is that true, or is that a fallacy?
Okay, let me answer to this question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Basically, there are two answers to this question. When this halal business, or what you call Islamic finance, or what you known as Islamic business, started some few years back. Yes, it was expensive because the base was small. Then when you talk about Islamic finance, they have to maintain some inventory as they deal in trade. Most of the banks, they have the inventory, and managing those inventories are expensive. But with the passage of time, the Islamic finance, it's become more competitive now. Now, I personally feel it's a myth. People feel that it's expensive, but the Islamic banks, the Islamic financial institutions, they are equally competitive to the conventional. The rates and the profits which are earned by the conventional, and they are in line with that of Islamic. So at this point in time, it's a myth. It's not really true. But few years back, yes, it was expensive. Considering that it was new, it just started. The base was not there. So and plus that inventory portion, that was the reason it was expensive. But at this point in time, my view is that it's not expensive. It's at par with the conventional.
But it's not competitive yet, is it? It's still work in progress.
So
yes, it's working again because the basis is still small as compared to the conventional. It is smaller, still smaller than its conventional counterpart. And until unless it gets really competitive in terms of size, the small difference will still exist.
Okay, that's good to know.
I think there's a different perspective here from Pakistan, which is a majority Muslim country. Sorry, this is Ibrahim from Islamic Finance Guru. In the UK, of course, Muslim community is a fraction, 5% of the overall population. So I think the analysis that you've got a small pool to pick from in a small market, and therefore you're going to have higher cost and lower economies of scale, I think is a stronger one in the UK. Having said that, the core reason why an Islamic bank is more expensive is not necessarily because they want to make more margin on the smaller number of customers they have. It's actually because they've got a higher cost of financing. So normally conventional banks, they will be able to access the money markets, and they'll be able to access the central bank in the UK and lend at quite low rates, and they can then pass that saving on at a competitive rate to others. Whereas in the UK, Islamic banks, although I know that there's changes happening right now, have not been able to do that. And so the way they get financing is by going to savings accounts and offering up various savers with them a competitive rate that's higher than the market. So they'll give like 2% or more on the savings accounts, which is consistently been the highest in the market over the last few years. And so when they do that, obviously then they have a higher base, they have a higher cost base, and so that's one of the key issues that I think causes this expense. But as I just said, there are works now with the Treasury in the UK to change this. So I'm hopeful that at some point we'll actually see a lower cost, even within the Islamic banks as well.
Okay. And I guess that's partly, like you said, Ibrahim, economies of scale, I guess, but also accessibility. I think the two things probably go hand in hand. So something for policymakers listening to start thinking about, I guess.
The other thing to say here is that there's a comparison piece here as well, in that I think there's a lot of information asymmetry in the market, and Islamic Finance Guru, one of the things that we're trying to do to address that is to compare between the different players in one place. And we found that when you start doing that, that makes the price discrepancies between different players. So in the UK, you've got Arayan, you've got Gatehouse, you've got Ahli. And when people can easily choose between the three of them, then I think you actually have an interesting competition dynamic that develops, and that I think will always have a downward pressure in the price overall as well.
To know. So I'm just conscious that we've got other questions coming in. So this one's coming online. How is halal or Islamic financing enabling the growth of Muslim communities and ethical businesses of the future? So how is it helping and enabling Muslim communities, but also ethical businesses? So this goes back to your point, Raza, that not all businesses have to be halal or ethical. They can be either or both. So I'll just repeat the question again. How is halal or Islamic financing enabling the growth of Muslim community and ethical business of the future? So Ibrahim, maybe if we take your thoughts on this, and then we'll jump to Reza.
Yeah, sure. So I think that, again, giving a UK perspective here, I think that halal finance or Islamic finance is quite frankly failing the Muslim community. Because when you talk about finance, you've got two elements to it. You've got the equity side and you've got the debt side. And I think normally when people hear the word finance, they think the debt side. On the debt side of things, business investments into small, medium-sized enterprises and startups that is structured in a halal way is basically non-existent. And that's a major challenge. We hear that all the time from people who come across Islamic Finance Guru. So I think that's one of the areas where we can do a lot more. I know there's some interesting startups in the pipeline that are doing work on invoice financing and factoring and the like, which they're structuring in a Sharia compliant way. So I think that will really help certain small businesses and startups. And then on the equity side of things, I think it's a little bit better because equity is fundamentally halal anyway, right? Venture capital is fundamentally permissible. And so I think there, halal finance is doing better, but that I don't think is necessarily what people understand by halal finance. So I think there's work to be done here.
It's interesting that in certain countries, for example, I'm talking about Pakistan, and this is where I focused over the last 18 years, that I was one of the first people to set up a standalone startup, you could call it, Islamic Bank. Basically, in 2003, when the State Bank had set up its Islamic banking division, and we worked with them very, very closely to set up a standalone or startup Islamic bank, which was called Emirates Global Islamic Bank. We were one of the first entrants that came into the sector. And at that time, there was, just maybe one or two. Mizan was there, of course. but they had converted a conventional license into an Islamic license, Islamic banking license. And when we started off, it was a learning curve for both the state bank as well as ourselves, and also the business community. There was this perception that it was not going to make an impact, and it was actually many times over the course of 3 years. I was told that I'm wasting my time in going and doing this, but we were successful, and I think when we got the license and we got the commencement certificate and we set up our branches and so on and so forth, that led to the industry, the banking sector, to be able to say, wait a minute, what's happening over here? So in essence, yes, it's grown. Islamic banking is obviously still in its infancy stage compared to conventional banks, but it made an impact, to have other banks set up, their standalone banks, and of course the standalone Islamic banks grew very large, and today, Mizan is sitting very much on top of the Islamic institutions in Pakistan. So, like I said, it is growing. It's an accepting. The communities have accepted it. Yes, the one hesitation or challenge is that the awareness is still is still ongoing, but I feel that has mainly to do how much effort that these institutions really want to put into to really make it grow, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that was quite helpful in trying to understand the journey. And Reza, do you have a point?
Let me jump in. Actually, you talked about two growths, the growth of the Muslim community and the ethical business of future. Talking in terms of the Muslim community, again, talking in terms of my experience in Pakistan, we still have a big chunk of people who are really shy of going to a conventional bank due to this interest factor, either in terms of deposits or financing. They won't raise their funds in a conventional bank. They won't go for a financing in a conventional bank. And that has really reduced, that has really improved. And people who are not doing any banking, they have moved towards banking. And that basically has created a community. We personally feel that financing to lots of people who were really shy of taking financing from a bank in the beginning, that has grown much. If I share with you a small research which was done by State Bank of Pakistan and DFID, it showed that 74% of the population, they were ready to move from a conventional bank to Islamic bank, subject to they have that availability of choice. So it means that the people, they want to move towards Islamic, they want to move away from riba, from interest, subject to the availability, and now the availability is there, and that really has created that community. Talking in terms of the growth of the ethical business of future, as I mentioned in the beginning, this Islamic finance is used in most of the countries as ethical finance. Ethical is used as synonyms. So the competition, which is like conventional or non-Islamic or non-halal businesses, they also feel that if you go ethical, their sales will improve, their sales will increase. So even if they are not Islamic, they are trying to be ethical. They're trying to be more customer-centric. They're trying to give more weightage to the lower community. So that has basically evolved through this halal business to Islamic business, and that ethical side of the system has really improved, and it's improving very regularly.
Okay,
thank you.
So just want to welcome Azhar, who's just joined us. Azhar is the head of Islamic Banking at Standard Chartered Bank, Pakistan. Azhar, you've got your hand up. Do you want to contribute something to the last point?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Azhar? Okay, we're having some, I think, technical issues getting a sound coming through. But let's crack on, and I'll try and bring Azhar into
I do think, Firoz, I do think we should ask Azza that question, because it'd be nice to get everyone's perspective, and obviously different regional perspectives. So we'll come back to Azza when we can. But yeah, please crack on.
Okay, so I've got a question, and it's probably a basic one, and I've got to say a little bit of my own kind of interest is in this question as well. A number of supporters, such as Taki Usmani, DM Qureshi, Salah Abdullah Kamal, Haris Irfan, as well as a number of skeptics of Islamic banking, have examined the differences between Islamic and conventional banking and lamented their similarity. So for startups, policymakers trying to make sense of Islamic financial instruments, what is it really? What does it make? And does it actually make any difference? High guarantees, risk sharing, those kind of things. So I'm really throwing it out to all of you guys. I'm sure you've all got a perspective on this, but who wants to take this one on first?
I mean, I don't mind discussing this.
That'd be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, why not? So I think when it all boils down to the essentials of Islamic finance, the Sharia, it demands two things, and it prioritizes two things when it comes to transactions. And one is to lower the level of uncertainty and lower the level of potential dispute that might arise as a result. And then the other thing is that it wants to reduce injustice done to any parties as part of a transaction. So what that in reality translates to is Islamic finance as we see it today. That's a manifestation of, that's an interpretation of that. And I think what Islamic finance has done well is meeting the uncertainty limb of that, criteria. So the two things were justice and uncertainty, avoiding both of them. And I think we've done quite well on avoiding the uncertainty side of things. And so that's been done by, not really engaging in derivatives, not really engaging in too many exotic products, etc. I think on the injustice side of things, there's probably more work to be done. And by that, I mean that in reality, to have, I think, a properly in spirit, as opposed to just informed Islamic finance system, we need to have a much more, I think, equitable or a more balanced risk-reward, so risk allocation kind of between the, the consumer and the lender. And it's in a recent article that we did on Islamic Finance Guru on Ar-Rayyan, we had a look at the kind of risk allocation in the transaction between the two parties. And Ar-Rayyan is not, it's not unique in this. Most Islamic banks take the same approach, where they kind of just hedge away all of the potential risks that they would have because they are an Islamic bank and they have to take some kind of equity exposure to the underlying, underlying house, which a normal bank wouldn't have to do because a normal bank just gives you debt. Ar-Rayyan, all of that potential additional risk that it takes, it kind of hedges it away by either switching it onto the consumer himself or getting it insured or doing something of that sort. Now, I'm not saying, by any means that what Ar-Rayyan are doing is haram or, ultimately I think Ar-Rayyan are doing a great job. But I think there is work to be done collectively as an industry here to address these kind of issues.
Right, great. Roger, do you have a view on this? And I'll come over to Mohammed in a moment.
It's a tough one. I mean, startups, for me, in the ecosystem based over here in Pakistan, have had it very, very difficult even attracting conventional capital, I'll be honest with you. The reason for that is because there are various factors. The ecosystem is not really, fully developed. It's developing right now, yes, of course. There's a lot of interest. We're seeing that. And hence, I think, until there is, a significant interest, I think then, policymakers and so on and so forth will start looking at, we're constantly playing catch up, unfortunately, for the rest of the world. But having said that, we've got a lot of very talented entrepreneurs out there, which are young, they're very hungry, they'll even sort of, just to make their businesses, work and happen and get it off the ground. I think they'll explore. I mean, they only have one avenue to explore. But I feel that if they really want, I think really it's up to the policymakers, the state bank, SECP, to really sort of say that, could we sort of help these initiatives, and of course then it leads to the banks, asking the same question to themselves, basically.
And then just maybe moving on finally to Mohammed. What are your thoughts around this?
Okay, since talking in terms of Mizan Bank, since we are the pioneers of Islamic banking in Pakistan, we have really faced the challenges which are faced by any startup, any new company. One of the biggest challenges were that we have to frame our policies in line with the divine guidelines. We cannot really go in line with the man-made guidelines. We have to follow the divine guidelines, and that is to move away from riba, to move away from uncertainty. We have to do all the transactions which really prohibit riba. And whether it's a sale transaction, whether it's a rent-based transaction, whether it's a sale and purchase transaction, any transaction, but that has to be away from riba, which really means that there has to be an underlying assets. So maintaining assets, or as I mentioned in the beginning, maintaining inventory is another very big challenge. Then having really trained HR, those who have this spirit of working towards Islamic finance, that's also a very challenging factor. And not last but not the least is we need to have that passion of working towards Islamic finance, because if you just work on Islamic finance with the business view, I personally feel you'll fail. You need to have a passion for it. You need to work for it like for a cause, and if you do that, then probably you will have this chance of surviving, because it's really very, very difficult to change the mindset of people who are really used to conventional. So you have to have that passion of really kicking through, really making them realize that this is the right type of financing, this is the right type of banking, and that only comes when it comes from the heart, when it comes from inside you. So it is challenging, it is difficult, but Alhamdulillah, over the last so many years, 16, 17 years, it has grown from zero to now almost 15% share of Islamic banking in Pakistan, and it is growing with each passing year, and we are hopeful that it will go to 25%, 50% in years to come.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm just wondering, do we have Azhar, have you managed to get online and can we hear you?
I can see him there, Firoz.
I can see him online, yes. We're not able to get a sound up and running. Okay.
Maybe, Azhar, if you can hear us, maybe we can. Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe if Azhar can log out and log back in again, it might just be a technical glitch on the side.
Yeah. Zubair, there's more questions coming in.
Yeah, so I want to ask this question to Roger. Given you've got your investor hat on today primarily. So as an investor, as an investor, do you see preference work with or invest in companies and startups that have Islamic financing behind them over those that don't? So when you're looking to invest in a company or work with a company, whether it be a startup or an established company, are you persuaded by those that have some kind of Islamic financing or Islamic relationship in terms of financing behind them?
Look, for me, to be honest with you, the only thing that I really look at is the founder or founders. I invest in human, human capital. I think that is exceptional to any business and to any idea, especially in this space. For me, a person or persons are paramount to the success of the business. And as an entrepreneur, I've seen many young, and I refer to Pakistan because I've been in Pakistan now for many years, and I've seen this ecosystem grow. And the country has a vibrant youth. Half the population is under the age of 35, if I'm not mistaken. And they've adopted to technology, and they've adopted to using mobiles and so on and so forth rapidly, extremely rapidly. And I feel that if we don't give them a chance to nurture, to grow their ideas and become successful entrepreneurs, we're doing them injustice, I'll be honest with you. And for me, that is absolutely paramount. So, unfortunately, as my colleague from Mizan Bank, esteemed panelist, he said that they have a certain criteria which they have to follow, and that's fair. I mean, I'm not I'm not dissuading that at all, and perhaps sometimes you have to go beyond that, and if there's an opportunity to invest in an entity, wherever the finance came from, as long as the people who are backing it and as long as the people who are leading it are absolutely passionate and want to make a success of it, happy to be part of that investment as well as success. Yes, having said that, I would like to see Islamic Finance really backing these entrepreneurs, as I call them, and sometimes it does make a difference when it comes to the perception. Like a lot of people would sort of want to sort of back these things, but in this market right now, it's at a negligible stage at the moment.
I think there's a lot, just to respond to that quickly. I think because the ecosystem of Islamic financing for startups is still developing, startups are in a very competitive space anyway. So when they're looking for advantages, I think that's what they're trying to work out in terms of this journey. Do they have any advantage if they're in the halal space? Do they have any advantage if they've got halal financing behind them? But you've highlighted a very pertinent point that it's the individual. So I guess if what I'm sensing from what you're saying is that you're going somewhat on experience, expertise, and gut feeling, but also if the individual makes sense and he's got all of those attributes behind him, be it ethical or halal, then that's a nice package that sort of is very attractive to someone like yourself. So I know Firoz,
absolutely.
Actually, yeah, just building on that, and this is a question actually I wanted to ask, just framed around Pitch Perfect, a competition that we're involved with curating here in the UK. Do you as investors and people working within this space feel that there's a shortage of halal-focused, Islamic-focused, and I use the word lightly, but perhaps stroking that with ethical-focused startups, in terms of incubator and accelerator programs dedicated to this niche with the financing behind it? So perhaps, Ibrahim.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, may I answer that? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Absolutely. I mean, in an ecosystem where it's still developing and it's unorganized, but they are there's a wonderful network of individuals who's trying to work with the government authorities and the ministries and so on and so forth to create these incubator and accelerator programs. We have the National Incubator program, which is now in the bigger cities in Pakistan. They're doing very well, supported by, exceptional people from the business community. But there is there isn't an Islamic focused startup in Pakistan at all. I'll be honest with you, or even an accelerator. I can't even recall if there are any even in the Gulf. Perhaps in Malaysia, they could be. But to be honest with you, I have and that's a very good question. I think the Islamic finance community, as well as people who are living in this or working in this environment should actually ask ask themselves this: that why isn't there one?
Absolutely, and that's exactly why Pitch Perfect is very important to myself personally. It's something we're trying to really pull people together and build a community around. I just want to move over on the same question to Ibrahim. I know, Ibrahim, you work with, I have done some work with new startups and helping to get financing for, perhaps I could call them ethical businesses in the UK. Could you share a little bit more about your own experience and just tell us what your views are? Do you think there's a dearth of incubator, accelerator space with here in the UK, or do you think it's quite balanced?
Good question. So I think that there are a whole bunch of incubators and accelerators in the UK, full stop. And a number of my friends have recently been on these, and a number of businesses that we've either invested in or have been looking at have been on these as well. So I think they're pretty successful. They have the benefit of bringing together the right communities and giving startups the right connections in terms of growing their business, but also growing their investor base. And I think all that's really good. In terms of Muslim accelerators and Muslim incubators, I'm still thinking about it, because I think there's sometimes when we do that, we might end up restricting the options, so to speak, because ultimately, if you look at it, what does an accelerator, a Muslim accelerator, add that a mainstream accelerator can't add? I think there might be a few things. I think it might reach out to certain communities that may not otherwise feel that accelerators other than this one are accessible, and possibly there might be an Islamic finance and that kind of piece around it, and also possibly the idea of Muslims supporting other Muslims has some traction as well. So I think there's probably a space for Muslim accelerators and incubators, and I know that there's obviously Pitch Perfect. You guys are doing a great job, and I know that there's another one in the pipeline as well, to be launched soon as well. So I think it's definitely welcome. It's definitely something that we should be doing. But again, with startups, I don't think there's anything against startups just going to a mainstream incubator or accelerator where they have the confidence to be able to do that.
Okay. And then just really coming over to Mohammed, I just want to quickly, Zubair, I know that we've got loads more questions coming in and time is running down very quickly. I just want a very quick insight from Mohammed as well. I think it'll be really important, and then we'll move over to you, Zubair.
On the same point?
Yeah, please, just very quickly.
Yeah, actually in Pakistan, I'm talking from Pakistan's perspective, there is a real shortage of such incubators and accelerator programs. We personally feel that we need to really work more towards that side. We need to have the education institutions who should work towards creating such incubators. At this point in time, we just have one university which has such incubator program, but that is also not being financed by any bank, because it's really very, very immature, very premature. So we really need such programs to create the depth, so that we have more entrepreneurs. That is something which is lacking, and I personally feel that we should really work on it.
Thanks, Zubair.
Well, my question actually builds on that whole conversation and what you mentioned about Pitch Perfect, because I think what we're trying to do through Pitch Perfect in the UK is create this whole new ecosystem of ethics, value creation, shared value, and entrepreneurship and all of that. And there'll be some things that come out of that we haven't even thought of yet. So my question builds on what you said, Firoz, and I'm going to ask this to Ibrahim first from a UK perspective, and then Raza to you from a Pakistan perspective. If Azhar is on there, then it'd be nice to get a couple of comments from him in the regional perspective. So I think we kind of know the answer to this anyway, Firoz. I'm going to ask it anyway. So do you believe that, based on what you've already said and shared, that there's a need for new strategies to meet these challenges and the complexities of the halal/ethical economy? Maybe if Ibrahim, you can go first and a short answer because I'm conscious of time.
Yeah, no worries. I do agree. I think that there is a need for new strategies. I think, in a nutshell, I think the crucial thing is on the equity financing side of things, for us as a community to mature and develop and create Islamic venture funds that are not just venture funds in name, but that are really, really strong. The same kind of pedigree that we see mainstream venture funds operating at. And then we also need to have debt financing and alternative modes of financing, such as revenue shares or project finance or asset finance, to help other kind of businesses that aren't necessarily suited for the really high growth venture funds businesses.
Okay, Raza, for you, any comments?
Yeah. There is certainly need for the policies. At this point in time, there are policies for the banking and for the takaful. These are the alternative for the conventional financing and the conventional insurance. They exist, but the others, the other halal businesses like food, like cosmetics, clothing, there are no such policies available. Although being a 96% Muslim population, there is less need for a halal. Actually, everything is halal, but you need to have these policies so that you can create exports, because this halal business is growing, especially in non-Muslim countries where the Muslim population is not the majority in terms of food, medical. So they need to have policies so that they can really come up with these halal options, and they may increase their exports as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Just if I could add to that, if possible, I just wanted to ask the panelists, the banking panelists, basically, that Islamic finance is typically it's basically private equity, right? Especially the mudarba, which is a form of Islamic finance, because it's two parties that basically finance a business venture, right? So if they really need to, if they really want to, they could actually really apply that and successfully sort of, I would say, perhaps spawn an incubator based on that principle. I'd like to, I think you've really opened up, especially at least, my mind, that this is something that we could talk about this later, but it's something that we should really do, in this environment. I think it was a very, very interesting question. And I'm hoping to see if something can be developed like that over here.
Great.
Fantastic. Good.
Some more questions after that. So I'm just looking at the time. We've got 2 more minutes. One question that's come up 3 times now. It's I'm just going to ask you guys very quickly to answer this. It's to do with the relevance of the digital economy, new technology, innovation, and cryptocurrencies. What is the space for cryptocurrencies in the halal sector, and is it safe? So one, is cryptocurrencies halal, and is there a space for it within the halal economy? Very quickly. I think cryptocurrency, let's be honest, it hasn't been really accepted by governments as such. It's out there. It's making an impact. Whether or not it conforms to whether it conforms to the
with halal principles and Islamic principles, it remains to be seen. I'd say there's still a long way to go, to be honest with you, when it comes to that. But should be explored. I would say so.
Roger?
Okay.
Sorry, I just answered
that. Raza, do you want to answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, when you talk about the digital, I think that is the future. And Islamic banks, Islamic financial institutions, they are very much into it. Payments through digital form, through internet, through mobile apps, developing mobile apps for almost everything. So that is there, and that has been acceptable. When talking in terms of this cryptocurrency, there are two aspects. One is the Sharia angle, and one is the government angle. As a currency, it has all the features which are required for a currency as far as Sharia is concerned. So in Sharia terms, there is no issue. It can be acceptable. But since lots of countries they have not allowed this cryptocurrency to exist in their countries, including Pakistan, where such currencies, whether it's Bitcoin, Parkcoin, any other currency, they're not allowed, as it is not issued and authorized by the central bank. So since it's unauthorized, so definitely there's no future for such currency at this point in time. But talking in terms of Sharia, yes, there is a possibility. The Sharia does allow that dealing in such cryptocurrencies can be executed.
Okay. Ibrahim, do you want to add to that? Just quickly.
So yeah, I agree. I think cryptocurrencies are fundamentally permissible. However, slight wrinkle to that is, blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies and token-based, offerings. They can sometimes be related to underlying activities within the ecosystem that they create. So, like, certain token offerings might be related to, some kind of gambling or, some kind of activity akin to gambling within that ecosystem, and that's how the currency gains value. So there needs to be some careful looking at of each offering on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, fundamentally, I don't think there's an issue. And of course, I think the digital economy and moving forward and putting banks, Islamic banks in particular, into the digital space is definitely the way forward. I mean, look at people like Wahid Invest, Yielders. We're seeing a whole crowd of these people coming along. In the back end, some of them have launched, some of them have not launched yet. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff in the years to come.
Great, fantastic. Firoz, I think that's all we have time for.
Oh, it's already that time again, is it? Okay,
Yeah.
so first of all, thank you to all of our panelists today, to everyone who's tuned in to our live webinar. We've got our next one in 2 weeks' time. This webinar has also been recorded, so please feel free to share it and listen to it again. And if you do share it, we ask that you add the hashtag Halal Economy and Halal Expo London.
Yeah, and some valuable insights.
Thank you very much.
I wish we did have some more time. What we've done is brought people closer together, and in this context, literally two countries and across the region. And that's exactly what this whole series is about. It's to become a stronger community of global and socially conscious entrepreneurs made up of seasoned investors from across the globe, where we look at impact and humanitarian-focused investments, investors, and the effervescent personalities that make up so many of tomorrow's startups.
So if you're an investor, startup founder, CEO with something to share,
or a policymaker that wants to get a better understanding of this space, then get in touch with us through LinkedIn, and let's get you in on the conversation.
Jazakallah, and see you all in 2 weeks' time.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Firoz. Thank you, Zubair. Bye-bye.